Dude, thanks for jumping on here. I was super stoked to talk with you, and I feel like I've seen you before too. I feel like I've maybe seen you around, I don't know where, um uh but yeah, obviously with Kyle and that connection, super mindfulness around exercise, working out. How did you like what's your background? Then I definitely want to dig into the alignment method, what you
Yeah,
developed, because I
yeah,
know certainly Kyle's very mindful of positioning and
sure.
how we're standing and moving and
Yeah, my background is largely like starting off. I kind of have like a description of myself as a younger person, as like a deranged baby giraffe, just like very long, aimless limbs going in all directions, and just very like uncomfortable feeling in my body. And then there was a switch into becoming like absolutely obsessed with bodybuilding, and just bodybuilding in like all the wrong ways other than using steroids as a young person,
and,
but just like
and
very beach muscle centric, and just not really much awareness around integration or balance or any of
right.
that. And then so that translated into a lot of injuries and a lot of like, I was playing ice hockey. I grew up in Pennsylvania, playing ice hockey at the time. And like as I would get more jacked, like progressively, there was like every 3 months, it was like, okay, I'm like 9 pounds more jacked. I would just digress in my capacity for sport. And I was like, what? Like as I look more rad and impressive, like all the actual meaningful attributes of my life just completely diminish. And then, yeah, just, chronic ongoing like back pain, and had some like shoulder dislocations, and had an ankle dislocation, had like really bad
Oh,
ankle injury, just like a lot of imbalance. And then there was also at the time, um, kind of like some imbalance in my home situation as well. My dad was getting into drugs, and ended up like, going to jail when I was like 16 or something. Now he's like the sweetest man in the world, and is completely reformed, and is helping people in similar situations. And, he's like really, he's kind of like a miracle in that way. But
oh,
that kind of presented an interest or awareness, at least in retrospect, of like how my home life and my internal life, my thoughts and feelings, and all of that, it informs the way that I train. In that situation, it was a compensation towards adding on size as quickly as I possibly could. I think as like a defense mechanism, because internally I felt, quite unstable and like out of control. And then yeah, that turned into move to Hawaii, connected with like Laird and Gabby. And I used to actually work at a restaurant called Colleen's, and Laird and Gabby would come in there, and it was like this epic thing when they would come in, like make them like a Niçoise salad or whatever. And yeah, that was it. Just became a slow journey of working with clients, to help them kind of unwind their own issues that I was like unwinding myself, and then studying Rolfing, form of
mm,
manual therapy, kind of like physical therapy, manual therapy type thing, various different forms of body work, and got into jujitsu, got into surfing and training, and just kind of, it's been a slow process of putting the pieces back together. And here we are talking about it, and still certainly in process of putting the pieces back together, I would say.
yeah, well, amen to that, because it's a continuous process, right? It's like it's always astonishing to me how much, when we take another advancement into understanding the human physiology interactions in this quantum space, that, like, it just rewrites everything, right? So like from the microbiome to, never putting your knees over your toes, which is not necessarily true, you know what I mean? It's like, and then because it's funny as you say that, there's several parallels to your journey and my journey, and I never really thought of it other than my so at 16, after being beat up by my brother, and my dad was a dry drunk. He got sober when I was 4, but it was just fucked up in the family, right? And so when I picked up my first dumbbell and then in 2 years gained 50 pounds,
Yeah, that was me too.
uh yeah, and then all of a
It
sudden
was like it was awkward. People were like steroids. I'm like, no, I'm just obsessed and very insecure. It's just like a dose of insecurity and creatine like every day, 12 times a day.
right, with a load of natural testosterone, right, when you set it
Yeah.
up right. uh and then yeah, man, I played sports and football and basketball and football in college, and ultimately got hurt, and then I had to, and funny enough, I studied, because I got hurt, I studied physiology, kinesiology, nutrition in college. And then you still like, it's not giving you answers, right? So then later after college, I went to, similar to Ralphing, I went to neuromuscular therapy classes in 2000, in 94, right? So it was like, oh, that made sense to me, turning on, turning off muscles, all of that stuff. So it's this area. This is why I was stoked to talk to you. This area is forever fascinating,
Yeah.
right? Right. It's forever fascinating. I'm reading a book right now called Body Electric. And so
Yep.
now you get into the emotions, which are magnetic throughout the body. They're pulses. They get in the mind, which is electric. It is pulses throughout the body. It's just wildly amazing, this thing that we have, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and so for you, having kind of gone through that journey, what were the things, having built all this muscle, look good, but slowly start to fall apart, not feel good? What were some of the big moments where you said, I gotta do something different?
I think with anything, it's like the pain for a lot of people ends up becoming the greatest teacher, and it's like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
the story of like the wounded healer,
yeah.
and it's by you getting placed into your own fire of yourself, whatever that may be, and really like being singed by it, and being misaligned and feeling lost and feeling uncomfortable and feeling like all the things that every person for the most part has resistance around wanting to feel. In retrospect, those are always the things that were like absolutely the most meaningful parts of our lives, and those typically bring us the teachers and bring us the books and bring us, the actual trajectory change. And so I think for me in that, it's just, I mean, I still feel myself making mistakes and I still feel myself learning new ways to be in my body with regularity and new tricks of like, wow, like that made me literally 15% stronger in an instant. Specifically, I'm referring to a thing called bite training right now that I'm tinkering with, where you're engaging your mandible and you're like you're biting. And I'll get back to the actual question, but this is just an interesting example of something that like
Love
I've been professionally and amateurly working with how to make the body perform better, for the last 20 years. And then never even thought of the idea of, okay, what if I put a resistance band around my feet and then I put a rag up on the top of the band and I pulled down on my jaw, so I'm forced to clench my jaw down and also forced to start to retract my chin back and engage that whole posterior chain. And now try doing a pull up, or now try doing a push up, or now try engaging in anything, shadow boxing. And within that, it's like, oh dear God. Like just like in an instant, suddenly I'm able to get out more, 5 more pull ups and feel generally lighter in my body. And we can get into like the mechanisms of why that is with that. But that's just kind of like a tangent of, there's so many just secrets in this life and in this body and in relationships and just the way that we engage. And I think it's curiosity and also like pain, which oftentimes curiosity piggybacks on pain because we're trying to solve our own problems. So for me, I think it was pain and discomfort led me to finding teachers and going to school to try and scratch my own itch. And there hasn't been one specific inciting like aha moment. There's been like various different ones throughout my life, which I'd imagine that's probably the way it is for you as well. But yeah, I mean, there's lessons everywhere, and it makes life more exciting when you realize how little you know, and when there's something that was been right under your nose for so long, and suddenly it opens up one day because somebody at the gym tells you, or somebody on a podcast tells you, and everything changes after that point. Like there's so
Yeah.
many more of those crossroads to come.
Hmm.
It's just exciting. That wasn't a response to the question,
No,
but
it
I
was
wanted
it
general.
was actually perfect because I too have laughed about these things, and I think they're very interesting, and the thing that when you said, you know just under your nose, that the first thing I thought of was, you know the idea. It was Patrick McEwen who I first, we're doing, Wim Hof. We were doing breathing stuff. We were doing pranayama for freaking years, right? And but it was like, wait a minute, like, breathe through your nose, not dominantly through your mouth. And I was like, holy, that was one of those completely. It was like I felt stupid because I'm
Mhm.
like, of course,
Yeah, it's right in
like
front of you.
yeah, it's right in front of you, and you kind of knew that some of that physiologically already, and you're like, why has why haven't I, similar to you? It's like you've been in this, and then you find those things. What are some of those? And I want to get back to the mechanism because I find that super fascinating too, about the
Yeah,
bite down. And maybe we
yeah,
can just jump into that, because I want to go through your list
sure.
of some of those some of those moments that have quintessentially had ahas, but then grounded into your new understanding and maybe habits and awarenesses.
Well, so I think something that's interesting is that there's a lot of I've done a handful of podcast episodes. A guy called Gabor Mate, he's like
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
well known in the world of psychology in general, but particularly on addiction. And one of the things that he mentioned to me in one of our
Amazing.
conversations was that he's like dumbfounded by the fact that he gets paid tens of thousands of dollars to show up at these events and just tell people a bunch of things that they already know. Like there's nothing he's not solving,
Right.
cancer or world,
Right.
peace, or it's things that are very like apparent. And he gets
Mhm.
up and says things that are very, very apparent. Everyone knows that. People like, oh, yeah, right, okay. And then everything kind of shifts after that. And there was no gimmick, nothing fancy, no big technology, I think that's the thing is, in many ways, I think for me at least, I'd almost prefer for things to be complex, because if they're complex and I don't understand them, that means I'm not an idiot. But so I'm like, I'm
Right.
waiting for like that big technological advance and it's going to save the day, which I think often,
Right.
that can kind of be related to like, perhaps some interpersonal relationship with your parents, like waiting for a father figure or waiting for the mother, to come and
Right.
like save me that I can lean on, as opposed to taking responsibility, for the here and now, right now. Um, but I mean, there's so many things that it's like, if we're just swimming in low hanging fruit to be healthier. Meanwhile, statistically, obesity's rising every year, and diabetes, and self harm, and usage of pharmaceutical drugs for anti anxiety medication, antidepressants. Like all of these things just seem to be gradually increasing. Meanwhile, the simple things just getting more sunlight, getting early morning sunlight, maybe reducing exposure to high frequency light after like 10 o'clock, so like blue light and all that stuff. Um, you know, Paying attention to your relationships, paying attention to the quality of your thoughts. Have you ever actually done like like been really intentional and attentive to like what are the thoughts that are streaming through my mind each day? And is there any practice that perhaps I could do to start to almost like prune that a little bit, just as though I had a bonsai tree in my porch,
Right.
or just stillness, having
Yeah.
some semblance of relationship of like not being completely bound by this tornado of my thoughts that are streaming through my head each day, or I mean, the big one that comes into something that I've devoted most of my existence to, is the effect of movement in our day-to-day life. And it's just like, it's insane when you really look at the way a modern person moves throughout the day, or doesn't. It's Your hips do not go below the height of your knees for the
Ever.
most part. Like,
Right.
ever. Like, it's off the
Right.
table. It's
Right.
it's like,
Right.
it's unbelievable. And you look at even the
Right.
way that for a person to have a healthy poop, to defecate as
Knees
you
need to be
go.
up.
Yeah, they don't mean don't absolutely need to, but just the
Yeah.
the morphology of the body, the anatomy and structure of the body. When you go into a deep squat and your hips go below the height of your knees, it elongates the poop chute, or the rectum. So there's a thing called the anorectal angle that starts to open up and elongate. There's a puborectalis muscle that wraps around the front, acts as almost like crimping off the hose so you don't poop your pants while you're out for a run or taking a walk. So literally, like, there's like clues in the structure and the makeup of the body on how to just live, how to inhabit ourselves essentially in day-to-day life. And in many ways, we've kind of divorced ourselves of them. I mean, the clues of, like, when the sun goes down, it's just long wave light. That's like a clue. Like, nature's kind of saying, like, okay, like, this is kind of how it goes. How is it that suddenly we've, like, abandoned having darkness in our daily patterns? And so the structure of your body goes, in order to have a poo, you would naturally go into the squat, and so to live in a world where the squatting position is, like, largely abandoned. Suddenly that might end up presenting a world that has issues like, billions of dollars of investment in osteoarthritis of the hips each year, and osteoarthritis of the knees, and hip replacements and knee replacements. And 80% of people experience chronic back pain at some point in their lives. And like, all of these, or discogenic issues, and it's like this laundry list of issues.
Not to mention constipation and all of that stuff of just the
Yeah.
crimping of the hose
And then the
and
opposite of constipation is peeing your pants, and that's the adult diaper industry. I think it already has, or it's set to very soon, is exceeding that of the baby diaper industry. And so those are issues that's not just being a human. And so readapting, reevaluating, and renegotiating the story of what does it mean to age. And I recently did a podcast as well with a gal called Dr. Becca Levy, who just wrote a book called the Breaking the Aging Code, or something like. I don't
yes,
remember.
so I had her on as well. Yeah, she's
Okay, yeah.
amazing.
So one of the things that she mentioned in that, was, I believe she conducted the research on it, but they asked various different groups of individuals around their perception of what it means to age around, like, in their, like, early 30s. And then they followed those people until they got into their 60s, and they found that it was some staggering number. It was like, I think it was like 2 times more likely to have cardiovascular disease if they had the belief in their early 30s that aging was a problem. That aging is like, oh yeah, you're gonna wear out. It sucks. It's sad. It's sad.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah,
come on.
I know. Well, that's the thing too, because it's a self-perpetuating um situation too, because I remember going back home to, like, Minnesota, and it's the way people live there is chill and in one respect really nice, but also they have this perception for the most part, that, oh my god, I'm 40, oh my god, and you see that, and then you see people actually start, you will, where your mind goes, you go, right?
Sure.
So it's all kind of falling into that, whereas let's just go into the Benjamin Button idea, like, hey man, what would the world be like if, yes, I'm chronologically moving forward, but what if I'm reversing?
Yeah.
What if I'm going backwards? And But there's so much in what you said, and we can unpack, we from our modern day world, and going back to what Gabor said, it's like it's like number one, like you said, we've divorced some part of ourselves. We've divorced common sense. We've gotten so distant from the natural rhythms, right? We've created our own environments where we turn on our own lights, we go to sleep when we want to, we blast ourselves we turn on the AC and the heat, and we're changing our environment. We're living 93% of our life inside, as opposed to literally flipped from our ancestors. And they didn't have to biohack, because they were living like they were supposed to be living in that natural rhythm. But kind of, I have this term called fatal conveniences, where we kind of, like, okay, it might sound great, but you've also then just divorced all this other stuff. You're dependent on shoes, your feet have never seen the ground in a decade. Like, it's all of this stuff, dude. It's like, it's just astonishing to me that on the one hand, we're even surviving, because it's just bonkers. And that
Yeah.
statistic about the older population peeing themselves more than the young, like, that's like tragically comical. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's tragically tragic too. Like the idea,
Yeah.
and I know that you're not like belittling it, but like that's like another one, and we'll get into, we'll talk about prettier things as well. But the one that's, I think, the most tragic, that hits me like the hardest, is fall risk for elderly. And that's something that I think
Yeah, yeah,
every person can relate to.
yeah.
Every person has someone meaningful in their life that they can picture being an elderly person. And they want that person, if it's yourself or someone that you care about, to feel sovereign and to feel strong and to feel empowered and to feel independent and to feel they don't need to carry a freaking red button around in case like they take a knee. And that's the mind-blowing thing, man. That's the thing that gets me, I go like crazy thinking about it. Like, fall risk is the number one reason that elderly need assisted living, is the risk of like, well, if they go down, like, what are we going to
Oh,
do? Okay, it's time that we got to go someplace else. That is that is not just a human predicament. Like, that's not a Japanese thing or an Indian thing or a place where people are just getting up and down off of the ground with regularity. It comes back to like a Gabor Mate thing, where it's just like, I can't believe we're even talking about the value of getting up and down off of the ground with regularity, because it seems so ridiculously simple. And that's, as you're there's an interesting book called Muscles and Meridians by Philip Beach. And in that book, I reference him quite a bit in my book, the Align Method, where there's a chapter all about the value of getting up and down off of the ground, just why that matters, and also like how the skill in it as well. And he refers to these positions of like just floor sitting, like hang around any kid or any person from any place that's not completely indoctrinated by sitting in chairs, for their whole life essentially. Um, and they'll just go through these natural sitting patterns: 90-90 position, or a straddle position, or a cross-legged sukhasana thing, or maybe a seiza, sitting on their shins. Maybe they'll toe sit for a little bit. Maybe they'll lay on their back. Maybe they'll put their feet up on a couch. Maybe they'll put their feet up on a wall. It's just very normal. Any healthy, like semi-biologically in tune being just will kind of just do that stuff. And he refers to those positions as almost like tuning mechanisms for the joints and the connective tissue and the fluids. It acts as a natural way to circulate all that lymphatic fluid and just all the blood and all the stuff. And the human body is essentially like, you can think of us as like a terrestrial water carrier. So we're like these bags of water, and it's like bags wrapped on bags wrapped on bags, and it's, fascial tissue is kind of encasing those bags, and fascial tissue is largely water as well. It's this beautiful crystalline structure, and what needs to happen for a body to be healthy is it needs to be circulated, it needs to be slippery, it needs to be slidey. All those muscle bellies need to be able to slide across each other. All the viscera, all the organs need to be able to slide across each other. And it's just this ongoing perfusion of fluid. And every time you get up and down off of the ground, you go through that full range of motion with your knees and your ankles and your toes and your hips and your pelvic floor muscles and your discs and your spine and the cerebral spinal fluid circulating through your spine and your brain, bathing your brain. Like, that is vitality. That's a healthy body. And if you remove that, it's comparable to like removing a pump from a pond. And now you have this. Before, you had a pond that was pumping 500 gallons an hour or something, and the pond's like, yeah, we need about 400 to 600 gallons per hour pumped to like stay healthy. You're like, okay, cool. Beforehand, we had this sweet 500 gallon per hour pump. I don't know if that's a big pump or small. I don't really know how pumps work in ponds, but just making that number up. So then you remove that and you say, okay, now I'm going to go to this like modern, more sedentary chair-based lifestyle. Suddenly, you've replaced it now with this like diminished pump where it's like, oh, it's like a kind of like 150 gallon per hour pump, and it's not only is it less circulation of fluid, like less force from the pump, just running this metaphor as visualization, it's also not even pumping at all to certain quadrants of the pond. So it's less circulation, and we've also blocked off certain quadrants that they just kind of don't get rehydrated and circulated anymore. Now you have disease in a pond. It's very simple when you start to really like just come back into how simple this human experience could be, and so then something as just like obscenely, elementary or basic is like, okay, what if I just incorporated more of this, tuning movement, like Philip Beach would call it, into my day. And, I maybe had this conversation with a friend, we're going to go like do a picnic. We're going to do it outside, and we're just going to sit on some grassy area. We're going to be some trees, what might be great, and maybe we'll put our cell phones on airplane mode for that time frame. And maybe we'll remove our sunglasses for that time frame. Maybe we'll be exposed to all the natural phytoncides and the chemicals that boost our immune system, for that time frame. Maybe we'll expose ourselves to some new social interaction, and maybe we'll have some compliments to some people that walk by, and start engaging with some of this like gratitude and this connection part, not feel so alone inside of our cell phone land that we exist in, and then we're going to get up and down off of the ground with some level of regularity. Every time I need to pee, every time I need to, grab something out of the car, I'm up and I'm down. I'm putting my hands on the ground. Like, that is training. Like, that is rehab. That is prehab. There's so much packed into that obscenely simple situation. But for the most part, maybe not the most part, but many people, I think what probably people listening to this would see quite overtly is it's people not really examining that low-hanging fruit aspect and kind of continuing to live in lives that are kind of void of some of those things that are just inherently health-inducing, and then waiting for the big biohack to come or the big technology that I spent $20,000 on, and I roll this device into my living room, and it boosts my mitochondrial function or something. And so that's the thing that I find it's just interesting. It's like cute almost in a way. There's so much out there, and it's so darn simple, and many humans, and again myself included, are kind of waiting for this big complex technological savior to come. Like, I don't see it coming personally.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah. I mean, that's why it's a little cheeky in the biohack world, and I too, I love listening to all that stuff, and there are some good optimizing situations, but there is. You think about that. I reverted all the way back to my kinesiology final exam, as you were eloquently saying that. I think the final exam was this pitcher on the mound is throwing a baseball.
Mm.
Now, what's act what's activated and all that, and virtually you go through the entire body from the toe,
Yeah.
the flexion, the extent, all of the stuff. But then as you're describing this stuff, I also go, this is how the real longevity, again, really simple longevity people over blue zones over 100, all that stuff. If you watch them and look at them in their life, they're not going to a gym. They're regularly moving, they're up and down, they're going for their walk, they're socializing, they're all of that stuff. And that again is kind of, we've convenienced ourselves out of all of
Yeah.
these things and isolated ourselves into these cylinders.
Yeah.
um and it's crazy. And then you did mention, because we're not these linear beings, like that, just that social interaction, and that just seemingly picnic, but infinitely complex in terms of
Oh
what
yeah.
is actually going on,
Yeah,
right?
that's like a systems theory perspective on fitness, that you become
Right.
the shape of of your environmental conditions. You know, and that's some. I'm sure you're familiar with Bruce Lipton, wrote the book
Of
Biology of
course, yeah.
Belief.
Yeah.
I recently went out to his house and recorded a podcast as well, which was like just a massive honor for me because, you know, he was like one of the primary influences on me at a young age to kind of start to look at the body a little differently. And what he does as a cellular biologist is, you know, works with cells in petri dishes and does different experiments and changes the um, the contents of the dish. The culture is the word I'm looking for. And you know, cool. What if we added a little bit of this? What if we added a little bit of that? What if we, you know, if in what he suggested to me, I don't know a lot about cellular biology, but is if you want to change the structure, the function of the cell in the dish, you change the culture that it exists in. You don't do anything to the cell. You just it's like the cell is a continuation of the container.
Yes.
You know, and that's like the medium is the message is another
Yeah.
way of saying that. You know, that's like the
Like
idea
the
that we think that what we are learning in books when we go to school and, you know, any place where there's education is prominent, like this, we are learning. You know, we think what we're getting from that is the math equations or the history lessons or whatever, but it's the medium that we're actually existing in that's having the largest impact on that pupil or that person or ourselves.
right,
So it's like,
right.
no, like, where are you learning? How are you learning? Who are you learning with? You know, like the what part is like details. So
Right.
that's if we can start to draw back, I think, and I think also it's very easy in conversations like this to kind of go into like a fire brimstone. You know, modernity is like moralistically bad, and hunter gatherers had this romanticized life that was just objectively better. I think that's also, you know, maybe a little bit like not absolutely accurate, because I think that there's a balance of like animals that live in a zoo, from my understanding, actually live longer than animals that live in the wild, like significantly longer. You know, and they have like safer, healthier lives in a lot of ways. Maybe not healthier, but like it's definitely safer. Like actually being like a wild animal is like very dangerous and like hard. You know, so to romanticize the idea of like, okay, we need to be hunter gatherers, like, yeah, Like, I don't know if many people really want to be like a true hunter gatherer, but the idea of kind of starting to blend, like I got this from another friend called Daniel Vitalis. He's the one that shared
Oh
this
yeah.
like metaphor with me. And he has a show on Outdoor Channel called Wild Fed. He's very into like the rewilding idea and movement. And what he suggested is the ideal for a human is like a well constructed intentional zoo where the gate is open. Like that's really what we want. You just want a fantastic zoo, where you have the environment that's it's replicating what the human in nature 100,000 years ago would have access to. Maybe similar type foods, similar light cycles, similar dark cycles, similar movement patterns, but it's within our high rise apartment, or it's in our home wherever we're living, and and then you also have like outings where you like go out into the real nature and have that with regularity, and that becomes, I think, much more attainable, where it's like, okay, cool, like I don't need to live in the woods to be healthy. In fact, that would might be in some ways be like harder on my body in certain ways. So how can I start to bring some of that into my world? It's like, okay, well, you could probably start to integrate movement patterns into your home life that might look more like what you would do if you lived outside. And so one of those things might be like just simple, obvious, low hanging fruit would be maybe get like a low coffee table and drink your coffee around that, or drink your tea around that, or check your emails on that, or do your Zoom calls on that. Get yourself a floor cushion that's up above the height of so your hips can go up above the height of your knees. That way it's going to stabilize your sacrum and your low back. And sit down on that floor cushion and go through a few different ranges of motion with your legs, just like any healthy child would do, or any healthy person around the world would do. And just you can, with that, you can kind of bask in the reality that, one, you're going to feel better immediately. You're circulating all that old built up lymphatic fluid and all like the stuff that pulls up in your lower compartments that from when you're sitting on a chair all day, you feel really tired when you get up. If you're just standing in place in a mall, it's one of the most taxing things a human can do. Like, it's of all the things, you could be outside painting a house, digging holes,
Right, all day.
standing in a mall for 4 hours, the most taxing thing that I personally can experience on my body.
Oh,
Like I would absolutely take a marathon over that, as far as like the way that I feel afterwards.
it's
And
so
so
funny. I just went to Kenny Chesney concert
yeah.
and stood there and I was like, I'm toast.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, what the hell is going on? Because we're there and we're having a blast and like we got to talk to him before and after and all that shit. But we were watching. You're not leaving. And we're
Yeah.
standing there for 2 hours. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my god. So I started stretching. I started because I
Yeah.
had to. I'm like, I had to.
Yeah, I want to make a T-shirt that's like says normalize stretching in public.
Perfect.
Like it's fine, Like
Yeah.
if you're living in a malaligned world, if you want to make some executive decisions for the health of your cells, and you're living in a world that statistically is going in the direction it is, you're gonna look strange at some point in the day.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
On the
Like if
back, you just put "be weird."
Yeah, which weird is an old English word. I think it's pronounced like "veered" or something of the sort,
Yeah.
as it means fate. And so the idea of being weird is someone that's actually in control of their fate because they're willing to be different. And that's like a rule that I have for myself. It's not like I wrote it down or anything, but a general rule that I have for myself is if something is to the betterment of my cellular well-being, I don't really care about offending people or making people uncomfortable. That doesn't mean I'm going to take my like penis out in a mall or something. But if it's like squatting in a bank while I'm
Right.
hanging out, or if I'm going to do a lunge and open up my hips while I'm waiting for something, or I'm going to hang off of this bar, or I'm out for a walk, I'm in a city and it's sunny and I want to get more sun, I'm probably going to take my shirt off and go for a walk and get more sun. roll my shorts up and just like get my solar panels out, and try to support my hormonal function and try to, just tuning my neurochemistry by being massaged by the photons of that light. I'm like, oh, I want to like bathe in that.
Amen.
And so within that, it's like I think that there is a lot of, and that can get conflated with kind of being like, trying to stand out because you want to be seen because you're weird, or there's like a pretentiousness to it. That's not what I'm going for. But there does take courage, I think, in a way,
Mhm.
to actually live a more cellular, supportive life in the modern era, which is kind of interesting.
Totally. I mean, there's been times, and I'm pretty okay in those situations myself. You probably even, it's reminding me to even do it more after you're talking. But there was times where I'm like, I want to take my shirt off because it's like I'm in a weird play in a city or whatever, and I'm like, but no one else is. And I know
Sure.
there's times that I've done it, and I know there's times I haven't because I'm like, I'm gonna look like a idiot. But ultimately, I don't care.
Yeah.
But it's like, I really don't. But it's like, it's so, there's so many opportunities, and yet we're walking around so afraid of what other people think with a tight sphincter, and we need to loosen up, and we need to start going into that place because we are slowly just calcifying ourselves, right? We are just crunching ourselves and solidifying ourselves, and I mean that in every way, right? I mean that in mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Move the body so you move emotions, right? So get those out of the body. Where are you feeling it? Where are you, all of those things. I love what you're saying. I think before we jump here,
Yeah.
um I want to get to your, and I want people to check out your book, because clearly everyone listening, they're like, holy shit, I got to hear more from this guy, because I love what you're saying, because you've put a lot of, you've just hit a lot of buttons for me, and actually lined up a lot of things that I've thought about, that I've felt. So the alignment method,
Align.
what,
Just
oh,
align
sorry,
method.
so,
Oh,
sorry,
it's
yeah,
totally good. I get aligned method, alignment method.
oh yeah,
People call me Eric sometimes. I'm like, it's fine.
it's Aaron align method, yeah, yeah, exactly. It's awesome. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's fun.
So you came with the system and a method in this case of, so briefly go through that, so
Yeah.
then it sets people up to be like, I gotta read that book.
So the align method is set up. I originally just wanted to call it align and make it be kind of more like a philosophical credo on physical
Mm,
inhabitants.
mm,
But the publishers were like, nope, like it needs to be the method. You need to
sure.
kind of structure and organize that. So I think that's oftentimes with many. I don't know. I would imagine you probably consider yourself an artist, or people consider you an artist, or
Mm,
anybody like creates ideas or content or writes books or whatever. There's like an artistic aspect to it.
for
Um,
sure.
it's typically more like, oh, I don't want to contain it, man. I want to, just like let it be. And the publisher's
Right.
like, nope, we're from New York. Like this is
Right.
we're making containment, and that's the really beautiful thing, and that's why masculine and feminine goes well together. That's like, that's the duality. Yin, yang, L.A., New York. Like it's both are great, and they're the best together. And so the align method, what it is it's a guidebook or a manual that includes all of the most highest leverage lifestyle choices and like kind of like hacks, which I don't really love that word, but just ways to make it so that your whole day 24/7 is just filled with opportunities to promote longevity, promote flexibility, promote strength, promote just optimism, feeling confident, like feeling spaciousness and comfortable in your physical body. And I mean, it really truly, like the reality is your whole day is an opportunity for that. Like there are very few situations where there are not opportunities to feel a little more comfortable in the body if you just kind of augment your choices just a little bit, or shift your hips in this direction a little bit, or do a little something with your feet, or maybe choose looser pants, so you can actually go through range
Yeah.
of motion, or maybe have some awareness of footwear choice, or understand the effect of light on your eyes. And, maybe it's like, maybe I don't need to wear sunglasses all day. Understand the effect of sounds in your environment, the way that that informs the production of your physiology, touch, contact. So it's what the Align method is really is like, and I had Andrew Huberman, he helped with the visual chapter. I had Patrick McEwen help with
Oh,
the
oh, nice.
nose breathing chapter. Had, like Laird Hamilton did a blurb, and Gabby did a blurb for it, which I was really grateful for. Kelly Starrett, he did
Oh,
the
yeah.
forward
Well,
and went through the whole thing. And
I know all
just had,
those people. You put them all together, the A's.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and a ton more people that I just really
Nice.
admire and respect. And so it was, and I've done the Align podcast, which we've done, over 400 episodes of that for the last 7 years, 7.5 years or something. And so it's like the coherence of the most just high impact ideas on how to really live a better day, all wrapped up into 250 pages. And it's written in a very simple, digestible way that you could be squatting to take a poop, and you open it up, which if you're squatting to take a poop, you won't have time because it'll probably only take you about 7 seconds to poop. But you could be sitting on the toilet or wherever and open to any page, and there would be life-changing information within a paragraph, and that was the litmus test as we were going through it. Is like, okay, and I did this on the toilet many times, where I'd literally just open up a page and start reading. I was like, okay, was there something that improved my day in this that was like easy and digestible? And that was really the function and intention of writing it. So yeah, that's a one description of it.
Dude, that's amazing. I can't wait to sink my teeth into that.
Thanks, man.
And by the way, I have another call right after this, and I'm gonna walk around on my deck
Got
with
to.
my computer because
Yeah.
even in this conversation, my awareness was like, I got to get up. Like
Yeah.
my body's saying, you got to get up, even though I got a cool like zero gravity chair and blah blah blah. I got to move. I got to get
Yeah.
up. I can't just.
The
So
body the body loves resistance. Think of the body and think of your cells and your just all the electricity, the body electric. Think of it as like one of those wind up flashlights. So the way that you get energy, like
yes,
you got to put wood in the stove to get fire, and you got like to get energy, you got to wind the cells, and
energy
that's,
begets energy.
yeah. And that was, I just had a meeting with some people from my team, and that was in the meeting. I have my little tripod thing here, and so what I'll do is I either set it up, so I'll like raise it up so I can just stand it wherever I'm at, and I'll walk it around like it's like a mic stand, or I'll walk outside and I'm holding it in front of me like a selfie stick, and so I can see everybody on the meeting. When I'm not talking, I just put it on mute so I'm not interrupting anything with like wind sounds or whatever. And that's how I do almost all my meetings, unless I really, really need to just be still because we're looking at some kind of
Right.
documents or something. And that's something that, again, it's like it seems maybe a bit boundary pushing for some people, but like, why not be in a business or work culture that we are advocates for the health of each other?
Yeah.
And Steve Jobs, he did like a multi-million-dollar walking path out front of his new facility, and that was because he really prized the value of creative ideation and just like the health benefits of just taking a walk. And that's like, it's another one of those things. It's like you feel almost like an idiot saying like, oh, it would be really great if we just took more walks. And it's like, well, looking at any of the research, it's one of the most high leverage things you could do. And it just, when you start stacking variables, And you go outside, you take your sunglasses off, you take your shirt off if it's, if it makes sense. You get around a body of water. Maybe you drip your face in a body of water. You activate the dive reflex and start to bring your body into more of like a parasympathetic calm state. Maybe you emphasize, and I'll shut up after this because then we're going to wrap up. You'll emphasize long exhalations because as you're breathing, you're tuning that autonomic nervous system. That exhalation is going to be more parasympathetic calming. Maybe you take in the panoramic view of the world around you. When your eyes go into that panoramic view, this gets into Huberman's work. That's going to, again, eyes are neurological tissue. So you can augment your autonomic nervous system with the way you use your eyes. So while you're on that walking meeting now, you're relaxing your eyes, emphasize some longer exhalations. You're taking a walk, you're around, nature, trees, all things. It's like, wow, like you literally just conducted this amazing therapy session on yourself, this restorative therapy. And it was called a meeting. That's what you did. You did a meeting.
Right. I love that. I think everyone's going to implement some version of that after this podcast. Dude, I could talk to you for hours. I'm honored and grateful, and thank you for your work and
Thanks,
your
man.
contribution to let us feel in and out of our bodies. So I much appreciated, dude.
Yeah, of course. And then if people want to go deeper into this stuff, we have a free community that we just set up that I'm quite excited about. And I'm in there answering questions each day. And we have, it's just a cool place. There's about 1,500 people or so that are in there now since we started.
Awesome.
And it's a cool place. It's completely free. And that's alignpodcast.com/community. If people want to continue this conversation, we share a ton of content, and that's a good spot. And then Instagram, everything's all at Align Podcast if people want to go deeper into the things.
Beautiful. And we'll put all that in the show notes as well.
Thanks, man.
Much love, brother.
I appreciate it. I look forward to doing this in person.